Hey, love buttons, Lisa here with terrible lighting. It's always a bad idea to film at night when you don't have good filming equipment. But I wanted to capture some thoughts I've been developing over the past few days, actually past couple of weeks, as I've been working with Stella's Tarot, a deck that I have a kind of interesting history with, very recent history with. I just received it about a month ago. So here's the topic. If you've hung out with tarot readers for any length of time, you'll find yourself encountering people's discussions of the voice of given tarot decks. And by voice, I mean the ways in which people would characterize the tone of a deck. So you'll hear people say things like, oh, this deck is really compassionate, it's very nurturing, it's a very nourishing deck, it will give you very gentle readings, it will offer lots of supportive feedback, etc., etc. Or alternatively, they might say, oh, this deck doesn't mess around, it will be very blunt, it will cut right to the heart of the matter, it doesn't mince its words. They'll describe decks, and maybe you yourself have done this as well, as as people with whom they are in dialogue. And that has always made really great sense to me. And in fact, one of the videos I hope to film soon will touch on this question of having a dialogue with our deck as part of my Learn to Speak Tarot series. I'll be talking about dialoguing with our decks. It makes a lot of sense to me. And up until now, I've really thought about that idea of the voice of our decks in terms of like the imagery or structure of a deck, both the way the images might hit me, the sort of ethereal quality of the images might lead me to think a deck is more gentle, more sort of forceful, graphic, maybe even more masculine, if I can say that, although it gets weird when you start bringing in gender and binarisms. But I might talk about decks like that as being more blunt and direct. Or maybe I'll think about the way in which an author or an artist has reinterpreted the tarot deck and how they see the tarot as a tool or as a structure. So, for instance, when I think about two decks that I really admire and I've worked with a ton, Pamela Eakin's Tarot of the Spirit, I've worked not as much with that as with the other deck, The Wild Unknown, Kim Kranz's, but both are decks that I really have worked with and I love. And what I would have said in the past maybe is I would have said, Pamela Eakin's deck, while the imagery is intense, it's not so soft and pretty. It's very it's very kind of reminiscent in a lot of ways of Lady Frida Harris's imagery, especially in the pips. It has that kind of Crowley Harris feel. Certainly the keywords are influenced, although some of the imagery is way more playful than something like Frida Harris's. The keywords and the pips often have a feel of kind of very intense, powerful, angular messages. And yet I would have said the deck is very compassionate, and that's because of the structure of the deck. So, this is from Pamela Eakin's Little White Book. She says, the Tarot of the Spirit provides a vehicle for the transformational journey of the soul. Each card contains a transformative image, which, as it is worked with, becomes capable of guiding the player. So she talks about playing the game of tarot, guiding the player on an individual spiritual path to higher consciousness. And because she sees the tarot as a tool for transformation and growth, all of her cards have a kind of positive edge to them. There's no card that's just kind of negative or destructive, because even the cards that might have that impulse toward negativity in a kind of more traditional, if I can say that, deck, for Pamela Eakin's, those cards are always tilting us toward the light. So, a card like Justice, she calls karma. So the emphasis here is really on the ways, the sort of lemniscate, figure 8, sort of infinity sense of, life keeps moving, our karma keeps turning, what goes around comes around. This isn't about, a moral judgment. You've done bad and now you are going to be judged. It's not justice with her sword and her scales trying to weigh our heart. This is karma. This is about the natural consequences of your actions. A card like Death, although it shows a skeleton, is filled with imagery of different phases or faces, sides of a person. There's all of this sense of light. Again, as with many of her cards, there's that kind of lemniscate, almost Taoist feeling of what goes around comes around, this eternally moving and growing and evolving sense of the human spirit. And so, when you read her description of death, death is not about death. Death is about transformation. And a card like Judgment, just like the card Justice, is not about moral condemnation, but the emphasis here is on resurrection. So it's not on the angel calling or the moment of reckoning. It's about us being lifted from the material into the spiritual. It's a card that's all about light. So, given that, I would have said, okay, this is a very compassionate deck. And then I would look in contrast at a deck like Kim Cran's, even though the artwork is in many ways, I don't know, it's, because it sort of has this black and white kind of almost like children's book kind of quality. I would have said, though, that this deck is very straightforward and to the point. Justice is about black or white. It's about the knife edge. It's about division. It's either this or it's that. It's either light or it's dark. And indeed, in her guidebook, she points to the responsibility of decisions. You can't have it both ways. Her card for Judgment, although there's also the emphasis on moving toward the light, this is a card that really, a good half of the card is in darkness. This is a card that really does allow us to see the ways in which, again, there's a kind of tension between dark and light. There's a kind of sharpness here. And then Death, we may be able to realize that life decays and that decaying produces more life, but let's not mince words here. Death is death. This is about decay. So, this is just a way of saying that for me, more often than not, as I've thought about the voice of decks, I'm really thinking about the design and the interpretations of the author. And maybe I'm thinking about things like, how does the artwork strike me? But even then, as I was showing in the Tarot of the Spirit with its kind of angular Frida Harris quality, or in Kim Cran's deck with the quality that feels a little bit like illustration and maybe reminiscent of a sort of the kind of line drawings we might see in a children's book. Nonetheless, Tarot of the Spirit I see as this very soft, gentle deck, and Kim Cran's deck is much more, I've described in the past as wandsy. It's very forceful. It feels like it's straight to the point. Okay? So that's how I've been thinking about that idea of the voice of the deck. That a deck that doesn't mince words is a deck whose interpretations are very direct, very, it's black or it's white. There's negativity here, let's not sugarcoat it. And a deck that might be more about the softness and gentleness of, hey, we're all evolving, we're all moving toward the light, like Pamela Eakin's deck. That deck I might describe on the opposite side of the spectrum. And then I encountered Stella's Tarot, which is a deck with very fanciful imagery, very childlike depictions. I mean, look at this fool. The Five of Swords, cat head, what? Even a card like the Eight of Cups, which is about renunciation. There's just this, it's slightly surreal, but it's really fanciful. I mean, I love this Three of Cups with, this orange tree and these women with orange juice. It's just delightful. And then that sense of playfulness, right? This is a gentle deck. And then I see a card like the Strength card, which has been renamed Miracle. And I'm thinking, this is a soft and gentle deck. This is a deck that's, the artwork is compassionate. The renaming of cards, the emphasis isn't on, fortitude and strength, but it's on the miracle. That this terrifying beast is just a pussycat, And then, in my very first experience with this deck, the very first card I drew was the devil. And actually, this is a kind of scary card, and reminds me that this deck was featured, and I think maybe even designed for a Korean mini-series that's supposed to be amazing. I'll post a link to, I'm trying to remember who the author was, maybe Bonnie, for the Eclectic Forum, about this deck, where the person who is reviewing it goes into a discussion of this deck and its relation to the Korean miniseries called The Devil. So yeah, what's that about? My very first card, it freaked me out. And indeed, what was going on was this kind of compulsive relationship to the tarot, to this new deck that I was already breaking into, even though I wasn't really ready to go exploring a new deck. It really needed to simmer. I hadn't gotten my bag for it. I have my whole ritual. I get a bag for a deck before I start using it. And I was just like, I gotta eat this deck. I gotta consume it very fast. And so, the first thing that happened is in the riffle shuffling of the deck, I bent it. And that was really devastating. It was like it bent. It's the cardstock. It's not my fault necessarily, but it bent. And then I would bend it the other way. And it's like, oh, crap. So I started shuffling it compulsively, but I had just edged, I talked about this in another video. I just edged my copy of another deck in red. I had just edged the Gypsy Palace deck in red, and I had red Sharpie on my fingers, so the sides of the deck got dirty looking, ugh. And so I was just like, I've ruined my deck. And it's funny because Katie Flowers has a video about Stella's Tarot where she mentions having trimmed it and then being really unhappy with having trimmed it and then having to make peace with having trimmed it. So it's just what the heck? So I then edged the deck in bronze, and I really actually love how it turned out, but I was like, I tried to erase the schmutz that I'd gotten on the end of it, so then it had little pieces of eraser, and it was just, and then I put the deck in a book press to flatten it, and I was like, I've hurt my deck. And then I bought a backup copy because I'm like, I've just ruined this deck. So the whole thing was, in fact, the kind of compulsive entrap behavior of the devil. It's like, yeah, Lisa, slow down. So I cleansed the deck in the way that I cleanse decks. I let it sit. It was on my altar under an amethyst, and by you can see in the background the selenium globe, and lots of incensing and all of that. And then I would periodically take the deck out and shuffle it, not riffle shuffle, just very overhand shuffle, and just sort of ask the deck, are you okay? And it's in fact in one of those moments when I got the miracle card, the strength card, and it's like, okay, phew, maybe the deck's okay. And then I pulled the deck out the other night, and I just was like, okay, what do I need to know? Sort of go-to question, what is this moment? Asking the deck. And I got the Knight of Wands inverted. And I'm like, okay, all right, tell me about that. And then I got inverted cards for me mean pull another card. And then I got the Ten of Swords inverted. Like, okay. And I believe I also got the Knight of Cups inverted. So I'm waiting now as I'm pulling these cards, all of which are helping me explain what's going on with my energy and my vigor and my relationship to this deck and to creativity and will and force and vitality. Why is that upside down? And I'm getting, Ten of Swords energy. And that's also saying, okay, keep looking. And then I pull Knight of Cups energy, and that's also like, okay, you know, you're drowning here, Lisa, you're drowning. What's going on? And then I get the Tower. And I'm like, holy shit, what is going on? And what I realize is what's going on is, you know, I'm pretty frazzled. The past couple weeks have been really frazzling for a whole host of reasons. And I'm feeling like this bubbling up of anxiety and, you know, ways, I mean, not a big thing, but, you know, it's real. It's real. I'm feeling my head blowing off. And the deck just told me like it is. It just said, yeah, things are, yep. So, I did not want this card. I did not I did not want this card. And I'm so glad I got it. Because it invited me to slow the fuck down. To be the eye in the middle of the storm. To see how my head was exploding. So, the Stella's Tarot, it's a very freaking direct deck. And it's direct in ways that have no obvious relationship either to the imagery or to the interpretation of the cards. It's direct because in my first encounter with it, I was in a particular place. And now my relationship to this deck, because after I got the Tower, I was like, put the Stella's Tarot away. My relationship to this deck from the get-go has had this tight energy, this constricted energy. And so the deck is just, it's speaking to me directly because I have connected to it directly at a deep level, a level of anxiety and intensity and compulsion. So what I want to say here, I think, is when we feel like decks are giving us messages that are scary, whether it's the cards we're pulling or things that are happening with the deck, like when I first started shuffling it and it bent, and then when I tried to when I got the edges got all messed up, or we're just finding ourselves reacting to its imagery in a particular way. Those, I invite you, those are moments to really lean in, because those are moments when the voice of the deck is really loud. And when we lean into these very noisy decks that we encounter, we are going to learn a lot about the 78 cards, and we are going to learn even more about ourselves. Okay. I hope that made sense. It's what I got for now. As always, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for your practice.